Stabilizers, 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 stabilizers. A much controversial topic. I feel like in a lot of confusion of people are like, how do I set up stabilizers? I've always ran one short little stubby guy and I see all these things of other guys shooting long ones, and what do I do, why, and how to do it correctly. So we're gonna kind of run through. I got a couple setups here from past years, current years, and kind of talk through why, and then also talk through a couple myths that are kind of misconceived and, quite frankly, don't make a whole lot of sense and shouldn't be the way that it is. So I'm going to talk about this V3X that I have set up, minus the sight. I didn't have this set up at the time when I was shooting it, but this was my setup back in 4 years ago, 5 years ago, before the bridge lock stabilizers. These were some Shrewd bars that I worked on them with. These are like the B-Reel version that we don't have anymore because we're shooting the bridge lock ones. But you can see this bow has a front bar and a back bar. I believe they are both 12 inches. One is 12. Yeah, these are both 12 inches. And then I have an 8-degree down in the front. So that little connector makes it like 2 inches longer out the front. And it looks like I have 4 ounces in the front and 4 ounces in the back. So pretty even keel out the front. So this is how I have this bow set up, but why? So stabilizers are meant to do a couple things. The biggest, obvious, most simple answer is when you're shooting a bare bow with no stabilizers, no weight, when you draw it back and aim, unless you're like a Bodie Turner, you're gonna vibrate, and it's gonna have a lot of vibration because it's so light and your muscles are weak because you don't shoot enough, and it's gonna feel like, oh, it's unstabilized, it's like I'm shaky, yada, 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 whatever. So we're like, okay, let's add weight. It's like, okay, well, you hold a heavier object and you're gonna be able to hold it a little bit steadier for a shorter amount of time, but you're gonna be able to hold it steadier. And then stabilizers, what they do is they bring that weight away from the bow. So we have a longer stabilizer here. We got weight out at the end. The most ideal stabilizer in the entire world, if we could draw it up, is the portion of the stabilizer would weigh 0. It would be literally, wish it would be nothing. Some stiff object that weighed 0 pounds, 0 ounces, and then have a bunch of weight out on the end. Super stiff stabilizer, all the weight down at the end, to get that weight as far away from the bow as possible so that it creates stability when you get weight far away from the object that you're holding. Same thing goes for the back bar. And then we're going to dive into some science here, so I'm probably going to butcher this. But when the bow goes off, if you have good stabilizers and a proper stabilizer setup, longer bars, when the bow fires, what long stiff stabilizers do with weight on the end is it keeps the bow in the same place in space as the arrow travels out of the bow. Now, if you have a bare bow, you don't have that inertia with the stabilizers to keep the bow in the same spot. So not only is it stabilizing the shot, but it's also keeping it in space in the same spot, absorbs a little bit of vibration, and the weight in a stiff rod keeps it in space. So there's a little bit of accuracy add there, along with just stabilizing the shot. Of course, when you add weight, it makes it feel heavier, and you get it balanced correctly how you like it, stabilizes the shot. So if this was a setup that I had, I'd love the setup how it was, but we've upgraded since then to now my current setup, the tack bow that I just built a little bit ago. We have the bridge lock bars. So what the bridge lock bars have upgraded is a more secure point of contact. It's literally into the riser of the bow. Of course, when you have your standard screw-in mount, it still is connected, but there's a little bit more connection points and loss of vibration through the ethers of scientific geometry, whatever that is. But we have a more solid connection point. And we also have our, famous harmonic dampener, which back when we did that video, when we did, I forget what bow, I think phase 4 year is when these came out. When we put them on, it was like world of a difference, the shot feel, just the feel of it, less vibration, just adding this harmonic dampener. But we have a super stiff aluminum rod, They went away with the carbon on these shorter ones. Aluminum, carbon, same thing. You know, they're super stiff, they're super light, very similar properties, very similar, you know, end result. And then we have weight out on the end. This is actually a 15-inch bar because it's my tack setup. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna run a little bit longer. It'll react, the weight will react easier, it'll react quicker. You can get the same result with less weight the longer your bars are because you have more, what's that called? Teeter-totter. Teeter-totter. You have more leverage with the weight out on the end. Then we got a back bar, a 12-inch back bar. So this is my current setup right now. So when setting up stabilizers, the myth that is not necessarily true is people want to get their bow perfectly balanced. They make these jigs that you put your bow in it and you try to get it perfectly balanced. And then when it's perfectly balanced, you're like, okay, let's add like one on the back and then one on the front. And then, okay, it's too far tipping to the left. Let's bring it in a little bit. That's wrong. You don't want your bow to be perfectly balanced, because what happens when you're perfectly balanced sitting on one leg and then Jake comes over here and pushes me? I'm gonna fall straight back. If something is perfectly balanced, it can become unbalanced very fast and very quickly. If you got a little bit of wind, if you're, you know, shaky, if the shot goes off weird, having a bow perfectly balanced is not necessarily what you want. So this is a famous George Riles. We're gonna dive into the target world a little bit. And I guess I'll first start with this. If you guys pay attention to the target world at all, you see these bows that these guys are shooting. And they have like, you know, longer bars. Like I have my target bow right here. So we got long bars. So again, you can do more work with less weight and you can have, you know, greater effects. That's why we have longer bars for stabilizers for the tournament world, because it doesn't matter. You're not hunting, you're not tromping around in the woods doing whatever. So we try to get the most bang for our buck. That's why we run longer stabilizers. But you see these guys with like 20 ounces out one side of the bow, just one side of the bow. And if you were to go pick their bows up, it would go like this. It'd be like, oh my goodness, there's so much weight on the left side. What are we doing? And the reason for that is you want to create some sort of bias in the weight. You want to create, when you're at full draw and you were like, okay, I'm just going to see what the bow does. It's going to go like this. You have to bring the bow back, you know, using your muscles, using your forearm muscles, and creating bias to push against that counterweight to create stability. You're actually pushing against that weight to create stability, to be more steady, to not be perfectly centered where any little thing will affect you. You're creating stability, you're creating accuracy by actually pushing into that weight a little bit. And over time, you know, you don't want to go throw 20 ounces on your back bar and be like, let me try this out. But if you do 2, 3, 4 and have it out to the side, it creates a little bit of bias that your body gets used to, that muscle memory. This is where you got to shoot a lot to get used to stuff like this. You can't just do it, pick it up, and be like, oh, I can set my bow down for 2 months and pick it back up. When you do that, you're going to be like, whoa, that's a bunch of weight out the back. Let me bring it back. Creating a bias in mainly your back bar, and that's why a lot of times you do have a back bar, is to create that bias. Now, where the myth is, oh, you create a back bar to counteract the weight in the front. That is true to an extent, but it's not the only reason. And then the other myth is, oh, I'm going to put a back bar on because I shoot my quiver on and I got all this weight and I want to make my bow perfectly balanced. Also kind of true, but not the full reason, not the only reason, and it shouldn't be the only reason. When you have a bow that you're like, I'm never going to take this quiver off, I'm going to hunt with it on, you should be tuning your bow, you should be shooting your bow with your quiver on with full arrows, because your bow is going to react differently with a full set of arrows in your quiver. It's going to tune differently with a full set of arrows in your quiver. It's so important to shoot exactly how you hunt, practice like you play, set up your bow, practice like you play. It's so important. That's why a lot of times I take my quiver off if I can. If I'm in a pinch, I'll shoot with it on, and I can shoot with it on. But a lot of times if I'm going in on a stalk, I'll pop my quiver off, set it off to the side, and then my bow is set up exactly how I tune, exactly how I practice, all of the above. But if you're the guy where it's like, I'm always going to have my quiver on, I really challenge you to keep your quiver on with, you know, you can have arrows without, you know, tips in it, just literally just to have the weight set up correctly. So one myth, it counteracts the quiver. Another myth, it counteracts the front. Partially true, I'll call it like 50% true, but you want to have bias in your bow so that you can hold against it and be steadier. That is so important, and it's a target trick. Like, it's not really, you know, a lot of things in the archery world come from the target side of things, because those guys are the guys obviously shooting perfect scores and doing all these crazy things, but they then get translated over into the hunting world. But in that leapfrog, a lot of times a lot of things are missed, or a lot of things, you know, like he said, she said, and then it's like, oh, you're just trying to get your bow perfectly balanced. It's not the case. So we have another bow here. This was one that I set up that actually, this bow shot really good, and now I'm replacing it with this one, but this was a lift. And actually on this bow, I only had 2 out the side when it started feeling really good. I kicked it out a little bit further to get that weight reaction. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ounces in the front. I don't know why, it just felt really good like that, a little bit more front pressure, but I had that bias out the left one. Like, if I held this bow perfectly balanced, without bias, that's how it's sitting right now. And then I come to full draw, and it comes and it locks in, and I know to create that bias, it creates that stability. You know, back in the day, which was literally only 2-3 years ago, we used to have sights that were big and bulky and sat off the right, and you know, if you had like a big honking old school Hamsky rest out the side, you had so much weight on this side. They're like, oh, even if I don't have my quiver on, I need to create bias or create, you know, this counterweight to counter all this weight on that side. Well, guess what? Now it's 2025. We got integrated QADs. We got Matthews Genuine that is so streamlined in the center of gravity. The center of weight is so in the middle of the bow. One, it's easier to mess with the weight because you're not having to mess with weight on both sides of the bow. But you don't need that counter weight per se. But I mean, even as I'm holding this bow, it's just wanting to sit just like this, which is good. That's how you want it. So way back in the day, when I was like 15, 16, 17, I had a problem in my form where I would lock my front arm out. I would almost overextend it, and my grip wasn't 100%. And I was reaming the bow like this as I shot. Well, I actually had my back bar off of my right side. Very few people ever did this. But I was like, I'm going to run my back bar off my right, and I shot like that for a long time. But essentially, it did the same thing. It created bias off that side. If I picked up my bow, it would lean like this. But what I was doing is I was reaming it back to center, and it created that bias. So really, it doesn't matter what side. The proper form side is to have weight on your left, the way that your arm is and everything. If you're a right-handed shooter, it's easier and better to be like this. Gets your arm out of the way. I had to wear arm guard if I had my bar out the right side. It wasn't a good program, so don't do that. But yeah, bias, guys. Bias is so important. I mean, target rig, this rig is like that. If I pick this up, gravitates this way just because of that side weight. If I pick this bow up, we got a little bit more weight on this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 3 in the front. 3 in the front because this is a longer bar. Bias. We got a lot of front and left bias. Which front weight, you can mess around with that. It's really how is the sight picture feeling? How is it feeling post-shot? Stuff like that. Stuff you have to really tinker with to just figure out how it feels. But bias. Bias, guys, is so important with stabilizers, especially when you do a back bar. So I'm going to pick up, this is actually Andrew, our operations guy, Bo. We were out here tinkering. He just has a short little nubby guy right here. So he doesn't have any bias per se, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, this is like, okay, I'm going to try to make my archery to the next level, and I'm going to try to, you know, shoot better, hold better, you know, all the above. But if you're just like, I want a short little stubby, Andrew picks his bow up in July, goes hunting season, and sits it back down for the rest of the year. That's just the type of guy that he is. So he has a short little stubby, and this bias, I mean, there's just a little bit of front, but left and right is perfect. But I would argue that with this setup, there is no bias. So there is, you know, it's easier to get it out of whack. Arguably, I would not hold as steady with this bow because I don't have that bias or stability out the back. again, with all this, there's also no wrong way to set up your bow. It's all personal preference. There are things that you can do that maybe up your chances to shoot better, and techniques and stuff like that. And with stabilizers, it's kind of like an endless rabbit hole. Of course, you can add weight, take away weight, all the above. So what I challenge you guys is, if you are setting up a new bow, or you just want to refresh your bow, you bought a Backbar, you bought a mount, you bought a Backbar, be like, okay, I'm going to try it out. I'm going to see what it's all about. Take all of your weight off of your bars. Take these two weights off, take these two weights off, and shoot it where it is balanced. And then add one and add one. Shoot it for a while. Be like, okay, I feel that difference. Add one. Shoot it for a while and be like, okay, I see that difference from 1 ounce to 2 ounces now. And then add one and then one. And then you'd be like, okay, there's a little more in the front. I got a little more on the left. I don't know if I like that fully in the front, so I'm going to take one away in the front. Maybe I'll add one more in the back just to see how it feels. And you're like, okay, that might be a little too much, or that feels just about right. And then boom, you get your shot set up just how you like it. And the Backbar adjustment, also standard for all bows, I pretty much have. I set them at 4 and 4. So 4 degrees down, 4 degrees out. That's just kind of how I like it. But you can also get weight reactions out of moving this Backbar all around. So if you tip your Backbar out more this way, you're going to get more reaction and more weight out this way. If you bring it in a little bit more, you're going to have more leverage back down this way. And then if you raise it up, you're going to have less leverage. If you raise it down, you're going to have less leverage. But having your bar slightly down like this brings your center of gravity down a little bit. That's why I loved running the 8 degree down on that V3X and really all of my bows until the bridge lock. Running your weight of gravity down towards the bottom, it's just like keeps everything in your weight below the grip. I really like how that feels. I really like how that shoots and how that aims. Also kind of a personal preference, but I do believe that there's a little bit of magic sauce to that, having your weight of gravity down as much as possible. That is why I took it off now, because the bow was just too heavy and I wasn't shooting enough. But on the titles, they had the brass weight mounted right down here. So they put a solid piece of brass down here to keep the weight, the gravity down. So I think that's really important to shooting well and holding well too. So a lot of interesting things going on with stabilizers. There's a million of them in the world. They're all, they're all chunks of carbon with weight mounted on the end of them. But the most important thing to look at is a super stiff rod. You want something super stiff with a vibration in it, especially for hunting. If you don't have vibration, it's going to sound like a tuning fork a little bit more, and we're trying to avoid that, just to have a quiet bow so that you can shoot deer more efficiently is pretty much the program there. So stiff bar, a little bit of vibration, that's what we're going for. You don't want a pool noodle. If you have a pool noodle, it's not doing it up to its full potential. So this is my setup right now. I just have 2 and 2. It's light, but I have longer bars, so it reacts better. I have a little bit of left bias. I draw back. I level my bubble every single time. I'm used to it by now. I'm more steady that way, and all the above. So back bars are not to counterweight the front. They are not to counterweight the stabilizers. They do a little bit, but that is not the sole reason why you should have a back bar. It's to shoot better and to be more accurate. So thank you all for watching in my little rant. We are running the Be Real custom giveaway right now. Make sure to enter on the website. 1 order is 1 entry. If you click from one of our new arrivals, along with any last chance archery or uncharted gear, you get 10 extra entries. We're giving away this custom Cerakoted bow with a back bar. You're gonna get a back bar, and even the bars are Cerakoted. I think it looks unbelievably cool. Along with a chance, if you win this bow, you also get you and a buddy full expenses paid to a total archery challenge of your choosing, that one that we're going to, and we'll work with you if you want to do it this year, if you want to do it next year. Not a big deal there. Along with, now we're kind of opening up some more entries. We're partnering with Moultrie now. Moultrie is throwing in 10 cameras for an additional winner at this bad boy. So make sure to get entered to win. That's loose. Get entered to win this sweet bow on Be Real Custom. Thank you all for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.